I've had some questions about the best way to approach the term project and how might be a good way to display the data and try to answer a question about it, like one of the ones I posed. So let me just start with an arc map that I have here, where I have streets, the parcel centroids data set, the street view evaluation data 1 through 5 for each address, a heat map, which I'll explain when I use it, and the town boundary. I'm going to just start by showing the boundary of Irondequoit, and that's the familiar boundary, and the streets look as follows. And I know that the temptation is to show all the data that you have, and typically when we've done an exercise I've given you a couple of data sets and you loaded them. In this case, I don't think the streets data set is really going to be useful. It doesn't it's not used to illustrate the theme of this map, which is the condition and value of houses. It's just a street map, especially when we overlay it with the with a single symbology, one symbol version of the data set itself. The roads really don't turn out to be useful. It's clear that the houses are on roads anyway. So I would recommend for this to not use the streets data set. One thing that is, and I know that I also gave you a parcel centroid data set, which really is, even at a very, very small symbol size, is really not useful or usable. These are just masses of data. There's 21,000 data points, and the colors wouldn't be distinguishable. They just go into a big mass. So I also recommend not using the parcel centroids database. What is possible to use is the so-called heat map of, and I'll take the boundary off just for a moment, the so-called heat map of the values of properties. So I use this data set, the parcel centroids data set, and according to the attribute of total assessed value for every one of these properties, I created a raster grid which has higher values. The value scale is not really meaningful, but higher values indicate higher priced properties. So the properties tend to be somewhat higher priced here and here and here. So this illustrates, and up here, now if we put the boundary back on top, and perhaps change the color just momentarily, you can see that not every part of the town, and there's not enough data in this part for the interpolation, the conversion to proceed, but not every part of town has very high property values. Some have lower property values. So using this data set to show what the value of properties is may make some sense, because this is with improved symbology. Right-click, ask for properties, and ask for symbology, and perhaps ask for a green to red color ramp, and say OK. One can see the highest value properties are showing up in reddish, and moderate properties in yellow, and lower value properties show up in greenish. So from low values to high values, we have green to red. So that's a visible representation, a viewable, visible representation of the values of the properties. Now it's also possible to add the dots, which represent which have an attribute that represents the street view score, and perhaps we'll take them down to a size of 4 so that they're not too dense. And right now this doesn't show me the values. I haven't added symbology to this yet. It's not showing me values So I'm going to go ahead and symbolize that layer, and I'm going to do quantities because it's numbers 1 through 5. I'm going to symbolize using value. The value will be the score, and I'm actually going to flip the symbols so that greens represent zeros. These represent 2s, 3s, 4s, and well, we sort of have a 99 there, don't we? So I'm going to try another way of symbolizing, and that's by categories. And what I'll do is add the scores, add all values, and now each of those scores has a different symbol. I'm going to take the 99 and remove it because it means no data. I'm going to take the 0 and remove it. It also means no data. I'm not going to show all data. And now I am able to say OK. And now I have a varied color representation, all weird pastels. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is make this one dark green. Say OK. I'm going to make this one a lighter green. Say OK. I'm going to make this one a sort of a neutral color, maybe a yellowish. I'm going to make this one slightly red. And I will make this one very red. And now it does give us a visual representation of the property values in each location. And now this allows you to make an assessment of the relationship between property value and the view from the street with real data that's visible to anybody. You don't just have to speculate or make it up. Zooming in can be useful. And what we see here is see the poor choice of colors, but given a better choice of colors, and I'm trying not to slow down for this presentation, but with a better choice of colors, the values or the street value or the street look would show up more clearly on top of the various values. And I think perhaps if I change the heat map to something that wasn't quite as red, so perhaps the heat map I could change to something like that. And I think I have too many greens and tans to show the house values quite closely enough. But that's the idea of the type of map. I think I have too many greens. That's the procedure for making a map that shows the values of the homes, the assessed value, and what they look like from the street, and putting one on top of the other, and making some attempt at showing or at explaining or discussing the relationship. So for the assignment, if you turn in this something that resembles this map with a paragraph description of the relationship between assessed value and street look, street view of it, that would be a very successful project.